evening, folks, and very welcome to Carlow Mental Health Association. My name is Rita Kelly. I'm committee member with the association. And tonight we're having a chat, again, in line with our usual conversations. Our aims are always to promote mental health awareness and to promote a conversation around mental health and well-being. Tonight's conversation is maybe a little bit heavier. Carlow Mental Health Association, over its 10 years, is known for broaching the issue of talking about mental health and well-being. Maybe we haven't been as proactive in talking about the other side of that, or the other end of that spectrum, which is when somebody suffers from mental illness. And tonight we're delighted to have Liam Gildea with us. Liam is a young man from the west of Ireland who has lived with bipolar illness for the last 20 years and has written a book about his experience. So in having the chat with Liam tonight, our hope is that it will give some information to anybody who is living with bipolar illness, be it themselves or a family member. And just, I suppose, Liam, in conversation with Liam, he has been so positive. It's been lovely to chat to him before tonight. Liam is so positive about his experience of living with what can be a very difficult diagnosis. So Liam, you're very welcome, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's lovely to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Rita.
Great. Liam, I suppose we came across your book, and I suppose having read it, it's a great read. It's a great outline of the facts and the reality of living with bipolar illness. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about your own experience and about how the book came to be, maybe?
Yeah, so I suppose I've had bipolar since I was probably 15. But I didn't get a diagnosis until I was 30. But a lot of that was just down to myself, lack of awareness. Like I think, 15, 16, I was, 98, 99. So there wasn't much mental health awareness weeks. There was no going doing talks to kids like us. So I didn't really know what was going on. I had figured all right that I was having a very low mood. But I tried to rationalize it and make logic of it, and I just kind of thought to myself, "Oh, maybe it's just being a teenager, or maybe it's my skin, or I was always kind of finding reasons for being
other reasons,
being so low." And it stayed with me. I went to college then for a few years doing an accounting degree, and it was always there. In the background, it was always there. I suppose when I was in third year down in Sligo, I probably started tipping into hypomania. So I suppose I should clarify bipolar 2.
Yeah.
And the main difference between bipolar 2 and bipolar 1 is the level of the elated highs. So both have...
I suppose there might be some misunderstanding, or maybe the terminology around bipolar, Liam. There was a time it was known as manic depression. And I suppose maybe that name explained a little bit more about the symptoms of your illness.
Yeah, it was manic depression up to 1980, and then they decided to change it to bipolar. I don't know why they did that. Maybe it was just sounded a bit more trendy or that. But yeah, manic depression was probably more accurate in a reflection of what it is.
Of what the symptoms are, yeah.
Yeah, so with bipolar 1, the mania is more noticeable. So generally it tips into kind of hospitalizations and psychosis. For me, the bipolar 2, it's hypomania. So it's a less severe form of mania. But a question a lot of people ask me all the time is bipolar 2 not as serious as bipolar 1? It definitely is, because the depressive episodes probably in bipolar 2 are probably as bad, if not worse, than bipolar 1. But the highs aren't as bad.
Can I ask you to, sorry Liam, I'm cutting across you. Can I ask you to explain what you mean by mania? What does that?
Hypomania is elated mood. So for me, it would have been extra energetic, no need for sleep, extra talkative, just kind of the life of the party. Life felt great, and the way it worked for me was I might have been depressed for 9 months and suicidal. And then I felt like I was finally feeling like myself, and I was tipping into hypomania, and it's a lovely feeling. It's not quite nice for people around you. You're okay for the first few weeks of it, but then after maybe about 2 to 3 months, you start becoming very narky. you start getting into arguments with people. There's a level of grandiosity there. It's not too pleasant, you know, it's just part of the condition where you do think you're better than other people, you know.
But as you say, when that period of mania is starting, it's really just a feeling of wellness and being on top of the world, really, you know, and you probably don't have that, or correct me, you don't have that understanding that you're becoming unwell because you feel great.
That's the thing, like, because sorry, no, one second. That's the thing, because you were so sick for so long, and you were just so delighted that the depressive episodes was over. It never kind of occurred to me that there was something wrong. I was just so delighted just to be out of the depressive episode, because I always knew I was depressed, but I never knew I was hypomanic. And that kind of, it's a common theme for people bipolar. We like the hypomania, we like the mania. It's a nice feeling, and it generally what was happening was I would present myself to my GP when I was really, really depressed, but I would never tell him that I was actually manic for a few months beforehand, or hypomanic. And what happened then was I was being treated for depression rather than being treated for bipolar. So,
okay, so there was a sense of a difficulty in getting to a diagnosis because of that swing in the mood, or the changes in your mood.
Yeah, like it was on me, and like the doctor could only take me on face value, saying that I was depressed. And then I went missing for 6 or 7 months, so he wasn't aware I was hypomanic. But I had a very good GP, and after a few years, I might be presenting myself about a physical problem, and he did seem to become aware that I was extra talkative and maybe a little jumpy. And then it was he was kind of thinking, God, maybe Liam's bipolar. So that was the start of it, when he'd seen the symptoms, you know.
So that must have been it was a difficult period for you, Liam, that's alternating in mood. But it must be difficult for family or people that care about you as well, because as you say, you don't always realise when you're unwell, you know, when you're in that hypomanic state.
Yeah, I think if you ask any family members that they have somebody that in the family that are bipolar, they generally say that they find it more difficult to deal with that when they're hypomanic. Like when you're depressed, you're not leaving the house that much. Obviously, there's a suicide ideation going on, but if you're not harming yourself, you're a little easier to manage. Or if you're hypomanic, you're like a loose cannon, you know, or you're getting involved in fights, or you're online dating and going to the other side of the country, you know, meeting different women. And it would have been kind of out of character behavior for me. But then again, like at the time I justified it, I was like mid-20s, I was single. So I didn't really think like even as my GP said, I wasn't harming anyone, you know, I was no harm to anyone really. But
you are putting yourself into sort of risky situations, you know, from what you're saying, and from reading your book, you did find yourself in some difficult situations, Liam, in that hypomanic state.
I got my head kicked in once or twice, deservedly so, but that was kind of the hypomania manifesting itself at the latter stages, where it was getting very argumentative. And obviously, if you start arguing with maybe the wrong people,
And those people have no concept that you're unwell. They see this as somebody who's just maybe a bit mouthy or loud, or as you say, that grandiosity that comes with the illness. Yeah,
because anybody that didn't know me, they would just think that's my personality type. And there's plenty of people who have that personality type. And my close friends and family did start realizing that, you know, I spent like 19 hours on a phone in the space of 2 weeks, and ran up a phone bill of 500-600 euro. Another thing is excessive spending. So I wouldn't really be that loose with money, but when I was manic, I could spend a couple of thousand on clothes. I could be backing horses, and I just blew. Luckily enough, I didn't have too much savings, but any savings I had, I blew the lot. But that'd be a common. All the symptoms I was displaying are perfect. You know, I was a perfect example of somebody that had bipolar too.
Textbook. And you've mentioned the other side of it there, Liam, the periods of depression, and from talking to you and reading your book, they were quite lengthy periods of depression and very low mood, very depressed.
Yeah, like I suppose the tricky thing with bipolar is it can manifest itself in lots of different ways. So for some people, they have rapid cycling where they might have 3 days hypomanic and 4 days low. The way it worked for me was I had really, really long periods of depression. So I might have 8, 9 months being depressed, and then I might have 4 to 5 months being hypomanic. I know my last episode of depression was 18 months. So it was that was a difficult one with suicide ideation every day. So just like, what is suicide ideation? It's fleeting thoughts of wanting to be dead without actually harming yourself or having, you know, a serious idea. So for me, it was just with me every day of the week, every minute of the day, actually, sorry. Just the wanting to be dead, you know. Look, it became normal because I could be that way 9, 10 months. So you can kind of understand that once them suicidal thoughts went and you were feeling better, it was very hard to admit yourself then there was an issue, you know. But
you wanted that bit of a buzz after that length of time.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's like being high on drugs. Like it's a lovely feeling. Like, and there's lots of people that are bipolar that still struggle to give up them highs, and I think it prolongs the illness, you know. Like, it has to get to a stage of a reality check that you have to admit to yourself that these periods of highs can't go on, because if you don't treat the hypermania, you'll never treat the depression, because, you know, once you go up, there has to be a crash, you know. And I always found it very difficult to understand why I was depressed. You know, I was like, oh, I have a job, I have a girlfriend, I have plenty of mates I'm living with, I'm in Galway, it's a lovely city. What have I to be depressed about? But the more I understood and more I learned, the more I realised it was just like a condition like diabetes type 1, where I needed medication just to manage it, really.
And you talk about those periods of very low mood, Liam, and I'm just concerned about, you know, curious to know how you kept yourself safe. Would you have been hospitalised? Did you need to be in hospital at some of those periods?
I was fortunate enough I had access to, so I'm here in Ballyhaunis and Mayo, and the next town to us, Claremorris, actually have a daycare centre for mental health services. So it was like I didn't have to be hospitalised, but I was going there every day. So I felt that was a better option for me, because I was able to go home and sleep in my own bed. So yeah, that was how I kept myself safe, really. You know, I was over there our weekends every day of the week, so they were continually talking to me, and psychiatric nurses were great. You know, like, and when I was at that level, I wouldn't have said it to any friends or family that I was feeling that way. But, you know, even talking to my nurse recently, we were on about them really depressive episodes, and, you know, they always kind of said it was always 50-50 whether you'd be alive the next day. That was in 2013. I was referred to that clinic, and I had a couple of episodes after that, but that was more so coming off my medication and that. But that was a pivotal turning point. I got my proper diagnosis, and there were a couple of bumps in the road, but yeah, about 5 years later, I finally got to grips with it.
Okay, and you mentioned there, you've mentioned medication, and it just back a little bit, you talked about your own understanding of the illness, how that increased over time. So could I bring you to where you are now, Liam, and in a very positive place in your life and doing well for yourself? So what changed for you, do you think, or what has brought you?
I suppose a very good psychiatrist said to me there one time, she said, you have to become an expert in your own illness, you know? Yeah. And that kind of dawned on me that I needed to research. I really started, once I got myself well 3.5 years ago, I started researching bipolar illness and studied it like I had the exam the next day. So, I did a lot of work on it. Then I started doing different voluntary work. I'm an ambassador for Aware, so I started doing work like that. And then I started just doing some media work, radio interviews, newspaper stuff. And I think I grew more confident when I was well able to do stuff like that. And, there was always the stigma in the back of me. But once I told the world that this is what I had, that stigma just went. So I really, I always think kind of stigmas with the person. Like the reality of it is everybody has their own problems. Everybody's trying to live their life. They don't really have enough time. I don't mean it in a bad way, but they don't really have enough time to be worrying about you. So yeah, look, it's opened lots of opportunities for me. It's allowed me to transfer into a new career. I was an accountant for 12, 13 years on and off. I was trying, I did okay. I was working away, and then sometimes I'd have to be.
But you got through college. That's through all this turmoil, you got your degree, you got your accountancy qualification. So you struggled through it, and you achieved so much even through it, Liam.
Yeah. Look, I'm quite a driven person, and look, in reality, if I knew somebody that was my age now and they were suffering with bipolar illness, I'd be kind of saying, look, I'd take a year out. But life is funny. Like I said, I've gone into a new career now, so I'm working a living well program. So it's a course we run for people with long-term illness, be it mental or physical. It's allowed me to write a book. So I started. It was funny enough. The idea. Somebody asked me, where did the idea of that book come?
Yeah.
And it actually came in my last hypomanic episode towards the end of 2018, and I just had a load of different ideas in my head, and that's the way I am when I'm hypomanic. My mind is moving very quick. I hop between a lot of different subjects, and so I had like this epiphany of writing a book, and I wrote down a lot of things. And it's funny, recently I was just looking on my laptop, and I came across a file I had saved October 2018 at 5 a.m. in the morning. So I knew that's where I was, and I started. It was like a 4 or 5 page document, and most of it was gibberish. It was very hard to understand, but it didn't make much sense. But the idea was there, and
the idea of your book was there.
Yeah. And like a couple of the lads always knew the funny stories and that, and they said, God, you should try writing a book. So that's what I started. I started doing. Sorry, go ahead.
I loved, sorry, Liam, I loved your book, and you said it yourself at the beginning of your book, where your book is a collection of short stories, if you like, and it jumps a little bit from one situation to another. And I think you made the point very clearly in your book that was reflective of the way your illness, the life you had with your illness, that as you said there, you hopped about between the mania and the depression, and one story, it's not sequential, and I suppose it reflects the chaos maybe that was your life at that period.
Yeah, there was no structure in it, so I tried to reflect that in the book. So it's not in chronological order where I go from everything that happened from 1999 to today's date. It could go from 2013 back to 2002, but that's what I was trying to do. I tried to keep it at times a little entertaining, so I did tell all the kind of the hypomanic stories.
And it is that it's such a serious topic, and yet I found myself having a giggle at some of it, which is lovely.
Yeah, so that the mental health books can be very heavy. So when I was writing it, I was kind of thinking, the depressive stories that I'm telling are very cutting, and you can talk to friends and family that would have said they found it hard. At times they found it a hard read. They wouldn't have known that I was that sick. So I tried to kind of put manic stories just to mix it up a bit. And I suppose the nice thing about the book is you don't need to read it in one sitting. Yeah. You don't actually need to read it from page 1 to the end. You can just look through the index and pick, like I always kind of say, the funny names are the hypomanic stories. So you can just read a few of them or read some of the depressive stories. I did put theory in it as well, just to give a bit of backbone to the book.
And it's a very solid book in terms of the references. There's, there was so much research went into it apart from your own life experience, Liam. I think for a family member, for somebody suffering with an illness, but I think for any professional, it's a great resource to have as well, because your reference list, there's so much information in that.
Yeah, I know sometimes when a mental health condition is personalized, it can be a lot easier to understand, because the theory of bipolar is heavy going, but talking to different people that bought my book, and particularly family members of they might have a sibling or mother or father, they found it very good. Just that had a more of a general understanding of what that person was going through. So that's the nice side, that's the nice part of the book. That was the whole idea, really, was obviously to sell a few books, but there isn't really an awful amount of money in making a book, but to help other people. And I think it has served its purpose, that it does seem to, from people I've looked at. I've got plenty of nice messages from different people. So it's not, I like when you're releasing a book, it's always hard to know how it would be seen. So I was a little small bit anxious when I released it to see how would it
I'm
be.
sure it's very exposing of yourself and your own personal experience. But Liam, if there is anybody, and I suppose bipolar, the disorder can be diagnosed as you were at, early 20s, you're a young man. If there's somebody watching or family member watching who's concerned about somebody who's got a diagnosis or is working towards a diagnosis, what's your advice to them in terms of getting to the stage where you are?
I think it's probably Irish people are great, and I think the default for Irish people is when they hear somebody is bipolar or something like that, they try and make logic of it and try to make things better by talking to the person. And a lot of the time it's like kind of you're not the only person that's going through a bad time, and they'll tell you different stories of John down the road that has cancer, and it's not really that helpful, because for a person in a depressive episode, if they hear somebody saying, oh, somebody down the road has a really bad heart condition and they're getting on with it, the only thing that the depressed person thinks is, God, I'm useless. Look at John down the road and he's fighting. What's wrong with me? I'd be better off dead. I think, like, rather than trying to solve the problem, you'd be as well off just saying, look, just be honest. I don't know what you're going through. And I often think, like, if I never had the condition, I'd find it hard enough to get my head around. But, just simple things. Look, it's saying, look, if there's anything I can do to help, if you need me to pick up your medication, or I always think it's a good one. Do you want me to go in to your next appointment with the psychiatrist and let them talk to you? Because a lot of the time when you're very depressed and you go into a psychiatrist, your concentration is very poor. So it's very hard to take on board everything that's been said, where, if you have a family member that even goes in with a piece of paper and pen, like, I know I've spoken to different people that read the book, and that's what they did. And they went into the psychiatrist, and then it was a bit more clearer to the psychiatrist in that, what was going on, because
they could present a better picture.
I know when I was sitting in front of a psychiatrist for the first time, it's a bit daunting, and because I was very depressed, I was very monosyllabic, so he wasn't getting a lot out of me, where if there was somebody with me to ask loads of questions, so like when people ask me, what can you do? I think that's all you can do. Like,
the very practical things.
I know it's hard watching your family member going through it, but it has to take its course. And for a lot of people, bipolar takes them 5 to 10 years to get well. For other people, bipolar, they never get well. That's the reality. I'm fortunate enough, but it's a work in progress. Yeah. Obviously, taking your medication every day. So if you want to just keep an eye on your sibling or your parents that they're taking their medication also. But
medication is part of the mainstay of your treatment, Liam. And as you said, you've come to the realization that you need your medication as well as the other forms of treatment.
Yeah, look, at the medication to me now is the easy part, but it's the hard part for us all with bipolar to accept. I can see when you're 22 or 23, do you really want to be on long-term medication? Do you really want to be told that you're not going to be able to drink that much because it doesn't interact? Like, I can have a couple of drinks when I'm on holidays, but if I was to have 7 or 8 pints now, I would be really sick with the medication the next day. But look, they're not magic bullets either. You still have to do, you have to do the work. You have to do your talk therapy, be it cognitive behavioral therapy, just to see, what's going on with your thought process. Because if you've been depressed for so long, your value system is gone, so you just need to rework, what's important for you. So you need just to kind of rework your thoughts. Some people find counselling good, other people find psychotherapy good. I've had a go at it all. I haven't done any talk therapy now in about 3.5 years. I wouldn't look at, if I had another episode, I wouldn't say I'd never go back. there's never, you know, there's no guarantee that even if you're doing all the right things, like when I say all the right things, I mean, you know, keeping a good sleep is probably probably the most important thing for a person with bipolar. You know, if you're only
You
sleeping,
talk about that in your book as well, about the importance of that structure and routine, Liam, about
yeah,
keeping that structure in your life.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Let's just say I started working in nightclubs, and I wasn't
Yeah.
going to bed until 4 o'clock in the morning, and then I was getting up at 9. It probably tipped me into a hypomanic episode. So it's
Yeah.
very important. You know, a lot of people with bipolar, they might actually need 9 hours sleep. They might just need an extra hour.
So
Obviously, then, you know, just do all the right things that anybody would do with a mental health. You know, just
yeah, and
exercise.
things that we all do without a mental health illness, a mental illness, you know, that bit around knowing what we need to do to keep ourselves well. So
Yeah,
it's you know, and I think that's the bit for me that's so hopeful about your story, Liam, that you really learned about your illness and learned about yourself. And I think that's the hope. You know, you talk about linking in with services, and you know, you have a very strong recovery college there in the West,
yeah.
in Mayo and that. So I suppose there is a lot of support there. You mentioned at the beginning that maybe when you started your journey, there wasn't such awareness or understanding around your illness, but there is
No.
a lot more there.
Yeah, and look, you know, the upshot of it is it's not a doomsday condition. I do believe that you can get on top of it. I think one thing will be is that it's generally, we'll say, a chemical imbalance, and then there's the environment, you know, how you're brought up and all that. I'd say for me, it was probably 70-80% chemical and 20% environment. But maybe for somebody else, it might be 70% environment and 30%. You know, I always say is,
But their focus in terms of managing it has to be different,
yeah,
depending.
look,
Yeah.
I was lucky not to have a drug addiction or a drink addiction. Like if you have, you know, a tendency to drink or take drugs, obviously then along with the bipolar, it gets very tricky to treat. So you're coming into a dual diagnosis where, you know, maybe you're an alcoholic and you're bipolar, and it's difficult. It's hard to know where the bipolar starts and where the alcohol problem ends. So I know for people with dual diagnosis, it is a lot trickier, you know.
And you mentioned earlier on in our chat, Liam, about you mentioned diabetes, and I suppose in a way, maybe it's a bit like diabetes type 1, type 2. You know, you have to learn about your illness. You have to learn what you have to do to manage your diet, your exercise, your insulin or your medication. And from what you're saying, your bipolar diagnosis, you have to do the same. You have to learn about your illness. You have to learn about the way you manage it.
Yeah, look, I always use the diabetes because I think it's the perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Like,
And people have an understanding of it.
yeah, and look, you know, with diabetes too, it can be corrected with lifestyle changes. And I always say that, like, you know, when you know people, we tend to kind of focus in on mental wellness, you know, and we all have mental health, you know, and we all obviously, you know, if you're not drinking heavily and you're going to the gym, you're going to feel better. But then we have mental illness, which is a completely different thing. So mental illness is like a bit like the diabetes one. You need the medication, you know, like if I give up my medication in the morning, it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter if I start running 5-6 miles. I'd get away with it for probably 5 or 6 months, but I'd end up crashing, you know. But
Yeah.
like I said, it's something you can continue to work on. It's something I continuously try to learn. I'd never say I know it all when it comes to bipolar, because even the way people experience it is quite unique. So the way I experience bipolar, you know, with the suicidal thoughts every minute of the day, for somebody else, it might be, you know, they might just get them thoughts once a week. So it's very individual. So it's hard to say, you know, the more I learn about bipolar, the more I realize I probably don't know too much about it. And then not to get started on all the other mental health conditions, you know, like
Yeah.
schizophrenia,
Yeah.
border personality disorder. There's so much going on in them conditions that, you know, sometimes I try and research them. But like that, I know two girls that have the borderline personality disorder, and I found it more helpful when I was trying to get my head around what it was when they were telling me their experience.
And they could share their experience. Okay. So I
Clearly.
suppose, as we said at the beginning, you know, maybe when we talk about mental health awareness, we focus a little bit on that well-being and mental health piece, but it is, we've always looked at it as a spectrum. And when you get into that stage of illness, it's a different, it's the other end of that spectrum,
Yeah,
you know.
and I always kind of look at anxiety as well. And a nurse said to me one day, she said, you can have happy worriers
Yeah.
where, but people worry. It's a natural thing. People just have a disposition to worry. But the thing is, they cannot get on with their life. Where, as a subsection of my bipolar illness was anxiety was very bad, but I could,
Okay.
I know people that can't function with their anxiety, and that's the mental illness. And of course, you can be a worrier, but if you can function, that's just part of life.
So I suppose the message you're giving is that it's so individualized, Liam, and it's about learning to know yourself better and know your condition better. And I think what came across from me from your story is the support, your friends. You had great friends who stuck by you. As you say, there were times when you were in that argumentative stage or that, and maybe not the nicest person to be around because of your illness, but they stuck by you, and when you came back to yourself and were well, they were there. And I suppose that's that, and the practical support that you mentioned is what we can do to help people.
Yeah, and I was fortunate to have good friends around me, and you certainly find out who your friends are when you're going through a depressive episode. It's one quick way to find out. But even I'm in WhatsApp groups now, and all the lads know. So if I'm messaging at 4 o'clock in the morning, they're going to be onto my fiance just to say there's something wrong.
What's up with him?
Yeah. So.
Liam, it's been lovely chatting to you. This is the book we're talking about. I don't know if it can be seen there that easily. It's High Life, Low Life, Living with Bipolar Disorder by Liam Gildea. Liam, how can we, I know you're selling, your book has been around for a bit. Where can we get your book?
The best place to get it is buythebook.ie. So www.buythebook.ie. That's the best place.
Okay.
It is, if you're internationally, you can get it on Amazon, but it just works out best for the author if it's bought through, and that's an Irish online website where there's a load of Irish authors.
So it's buythebook.ie.
Yeah, and look, that's the thing with books, whilst books, it's great to be selling books on Amazon, they keep maybe 80% of the profits, where at least if you're...
So we won't mention Amazon. We won't even talk about Amazon. We're on Buy the Book, Liam. Buythebook.ie.
And it just works out better for authors, because I know, I'm only new into the industry and I'm only learning these things now. So I think all local Irish authors prefer them to be bought in bookstores. I don't think they're in bookstores in Carlow, but they are in bookstores around the west.
Around the west. Okay, well, Liam, we'll put up that link on our website. And it's been lovely chatting to you. We've had a couple of conversations, so it's really, and I suppose my own background, I worked as a psychiatric nurse, and I suppose like that, meeting young people who get a diagnosis at that very crucial stage of their lives, it can often be a very sort of a devastating diagnosis. But I think, when we think in terms of recovery and moving towards kind of people with lived experience, sharing that experience, you're a real ambassador for living with mental illness.
Yeah, I look at it and say, if you can come out the right side, everything else will be easy, because you do build up resilience. So it was a tough 20 years, but one time I didn't want to tell people about my experience, but when I was sitting back from it, I have 20 years experience in it, so I said it'd be a shame not to tell not to help other people. So
and you've said to me in other conversations that while if you had the choice, you mightn't choose to have the condition you have, but you've learned so much from it, and as you said, it's brought you to a whole different career. It has brought so many positives to your life as well.
Yeah, look, it's made me a better person, really, because I'm far more empathic than I would have been if I didn't have the condition. So whether people are going through a physical problem or a mental health problem, I know what it's like, and I certainly can, I can empathize with people that there's always hope. It will end. It might take time, but there's always hope. So that'd be my kind of leaving part, would be try and get your diagnosis early. If I gotten a hold on my diagnosis when I was 20, 21, it would have made my life a lot easier. But so I'd be hoping anybody watching in or reading the book, it might just give them the courage to just say to the doctor that something isn't right, you know.
Yeah. And I suppose that's the important thing to say as well, that you've got support and help through your local mental health services, but that is a secondary service and you have to be referred into that service through your GP. So your GP is the first point of call. Okay.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a good point that you mentioned about, you know, allowing your family or somebody, a loved one, be part of the journey with you, because there are times you're not able to talk to the doctor or be honest with them, that you don't always have that same insight. So there's been lots of little gems in your conversation, Liam. I suppose I just want to thank you again. We will put up the link to the book, and I mentioned it there, but even for professionals, I think it's a very good book to have, because it's so personalized, and it really, you could follow your footsteps in it and see the highs and lows, really. So it's been a lovely read, Liam, and fair play to you. It's a great achievement. Best of luck to you. It's been lovely talking to you.
Thanks,
and
man.
I suppose just from Carlow Mental Health, well, before we finish, I just want to, you know, it's been a heavier subject than we often talk about. So just in case anybody has been upset, or, you know, if something has touched you, just to be aware of the Samaritans is there. Have to put the glasses on for this bit, Liam. 116123 is the 24/7, 7 days a week number to contact Samaritans, and they're also available at joe@samaritans.org if you want to email them. If you don't feel you're able to have a conversation, you can email Samaritans as well, and they will come back to you. And the other line, and Liam there himself mentioned Aware, he's an ambassador for Aware. We normally associate Aware support groups with depression, but Aware also deal with bipolar illness. So Aware 1-800-80-48-48, and their helpline is available from 10 to 10, 7 days a week. So 10 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, 7 days a week, 1-800-80-48-48. Again, as I say, Carlow Mental Health Association, part of our role is signposting to services. On our website, you will get all the information around Aware, Samaritans, and any support services. We're very lucky here in Carlow. We have a very good recovery college based in Kilkenny. And I suppose the one good thing about COVID is their courses have all gone online. So there is access to a lot of the education programs that Liam has talked about, where you learn more about your illness. The tutors in the recovery college are people with lived experience alongside professionals. So you get that mix of somebody, as Liam has been talking to us, who has seen the ups and downs of their illness alongside the professional help. So we also have the Involvement Centre in Carlow, which is a peer support centre for people who are living with mental illness. So again, come on to Carlow Mental Health website or make contact with us for signposting for any of those support services available here in Carlow in the area. And Liam, again, just a very heartfelt thank you on behalf of the association for giving your time, and the best of luck. We'll watch this space, because you've been chatting to Matt Cooper, you've been chatting to Pat Kenny. We're damn lucky to get you. So really appreciate your time, Liam. Thanks a million. It was lovely talking to you, and the best of luck. Continued success to you.
Thanks very much, Rita.
Thank you.